What we really need to be doing is reducing regulation and waste. This is highlighted by the Doge's work, the Department of Government Efficiency. A lot of money there could be done. We should also be looking at the GAO, the Governmental Accountability Office. There are reports that show close to $500 billion in improper payments. That would be a much better step in the right direction to allowing for us to unleash the economic potential here in America. Hello, welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. Well, look, we've got a lot to talk about. Did you catch President Trump's address to Congress last week? I've shared some key highlights on X where I went through, watched all hour and 40 minutes as it was going and basically live tweeted it throughout. So make sure to check that out in the show notes. My main takeaway is that he's addressing American voters' concerns about the economy head on, and it's about time. It's been way too long. There are still some things that I'm concerned about here that I want to talk about today, but I think overall, things look in the right direction. So remember, you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to share it with your friends and family and get all the show notes at vanceginn.substack.com. So with all that, let's get right into it, all right? Number one, Trump's address to Congress. In the news, last week, President Trump addressed a joint session of Congress for the first time since returning to the White House. He discussed education, the economy, tax cuts, the Doge's work, federal government or the federal budget overall, and balancing the budget even, and reducing regulations. Trump acknowledged that tariffs could cause pain to Americans and reiterated his promises to eliminate taxes on tips, Social Security benefits, and overtime pay. My take on this is that we need to be selecting tax cuts over tariffs. Tariffs will hurt Americans more than President Trump acknowledges. It's hurt us in the past when we had the Trump tariffs during the first administration. It was a huge drag on economic activity. As someone who was the chief economist for the Office of Management and Budget during the first term, and as someone who looked at the modeling and helped to put out the revenue stream and the economic picture for the upcoming 10-year budget window for the president's budget, we found in my team of economists, we found a major drag of more than a half percentage point from those tariffs from economic activity. That means less job creation, less economic growth, and lower prosperity, because remember, it does hit us. And then you also have the retaliatory tariffs from the other countries. And so then it becomes this fight over trade wars. What we really need to be doing is reducing regulation and waste. This is highlighted by the Doge's work, the Department of Government Efficiency. A lot of money there could be done. We should also be looking at the GAO, the Governmental Accountability Office. There are reports that show close to $500 billion in improper payments. That would be a much better step in the right direction to allowing for us to unleash the economic potential here in America. We also should reset America's vision. I think it should really be about a focus on free markets, limited government, and fiscal responsibility. We did hear some of that, right, by President Trump saying we need to be spending less, cutting government waste, and even balancing the budget, which I think would be huge. But that's got to be done through both the tax cuts, you have more economic growth, and deregulation as well, by having the broadest base with the lowest rates possible, not narrowing it out and excluding things and everything else. Those are to help out politically, but will not help out economically at the end of the day. But we also got to think about the spending side. We need sustainable budgets to be passed to make sure that whatever the tax cuts that they do are also met with spending restraint. We've seen in the past that this has not been a good situation whenever those two haven't been paired together with higher inflation, higher interest rates, and less economic opportunity. That's not what we need in this sort of situation. So by returning to a free market vision of the economy, by having free trade with our allies and cutting spending and simplifying taxes, restoring energy independence and everything else, we can really be back where he said America's back. That's the way we need America to be back overall, okay? Number two, tariffs, troublesome impacts. In the news, following the implementation of Trump's tariffs last week, the stock market dropped, and Canada and China quickly retaliated with their own tariffs and threatened to block some American products. This action particularly impacts U.S. farmers, and some industries are even getting exemptions, like the car industry, for example, right? I thought this wasn't going to hurt anyway. But, President Trump said in his speech that there is going to be some pain. At least he's acknowledging that this will be painful for Americans. And there's some talk about how we don't need cheap goods. It's not part of the American, quote unquote, the American dream. Well, there's not the American dream. There's an American dream. People have different dreams for where they want to be in life and everything else. But it's also not just about cheap goods. It's also about people being able to prosper and getting things that they want as something that's affordable. I think it's very egotistic for those who say we don't need cheap goods, who they are probably the ones that can afford the more expensive goods, but don't look out for those who can't afford those goods. And this is putting a huge hit on those Americans in the process. It's just a bad news. And by the way, I mean, I wrote a piece here recently about Kansas. You have a lot of the agriculture industry who will be hit hard, just like they were hit hard during the first Trump administration's tariffs. And then what did Congress and Trump do? They came in and gave them subsidies to bail them out, these farmers and everything else, to bail them out for the the hit that they took from the tariffs. So this clearly has a costly effect on people, and it should be something that we should not be doing overall. I just think this is a bad idea at the end of the day. We need to anticipate these policy mistakes, move away from mercantilist approaches, and instead find ways to reduce the cost of doing business at home, removing government barriers in the process, and allowing for more people to prosper. That's what we should do, okay? Number 3, go Doge go. In the news, the Department of Government Efficiency, the Doge, has been making significant changes in Washington. Through the Office of Personnel Management, Doge cuts bureaucracy and dismantles large portions of the administrative state. For example, the IRS plans to reduce its workforce by up to 50%. Nearly 45,000 jobs could be lost there here pretty soon. We've already seen that about 77,000 federal workers resigned. Remember that email they sent out saying, hey, reply, resign, and we'll take you off and we'll give you severance through the end of September, which is basically through the end of the fiscal year. That was already budgeted in. It's not like an additional cost because they were already budgeted in for that period of time. And so I think that's something that needs to continue to be looked at. Why do we have so many in government? How much more can we do this through government, through AI, through technology and everything else, and not have to have so many federal employees in the process? You know, I do know that the federal contractors are also getting hit. I've talked to some of them. Some of them are actually my friends who have lost their job recently. But my hope is that they will be able to find even more productive jobs based on profit and loss, not based on taxpayer money that's filtered through to them. So while I empathize with them of losing their position, I'm hopeful that they can find even better job, even better paying job in the private sector. So keep your head up, keep working at it. We really need an honest look at government. And we also should be doing this at the state level too. It's not just the federal government that needs to be shrunk. It's state government and local government. I mean, just in Texas alone, there are about 1.9 million state and local workers, government employees. And remember, that's all on the backs of the private sector. None of them are creating anything that's adding value. Maybe they are preserving or securing our liberty so that we can have value to provide and create in the private sector. But the government just takes money from us to then spend it or use it in other ways. It's a redistribution mechanism, okay? All right. Number 4, urgent need for new central bank planning, central bank leader, okay? In the news, House Financial Services Committee Chairman French Hill and Senate Banking Committee Chairman Tim Scott led a letter to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, urging the swift appointment of a vice chair for supervision of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. They emphasized the need for strong leadership to address Biden's era regulation and maintain accountability and streamline the Fed's regulatory functions. My take on this is that we've got to end the Biden era regulations. It's just stifling, strangling economic activity. Nearly $2 trillion in hidden taxes on all of us are coming through the form of those regulations, those new regulations that were imposed by the Biden administration. That's on top of all the other regulations that were already out there. And so if this position, the supervisory role on the Federal Reserve Board, if it's left unfilled, Fed Chair Jerome Powell will consolidate power, keeping excessive Biden-era regulations in place, including the bad Basel III endgames, harmful capital requirements that restrict lending. This is a direct impact on us and our financial institutions and should be thrown out as soon as possible. That's why we need someone good to be in there. I'm urging them to fill this vacancy. President Trump must quickly fill the vacant vice chair for supervision role with a pro-growth free market leader to increase transparency and accountability. With crucial banking policy decisions on the horizon, the country needs a regulator who understands the danger of regulation, over-regulation, and can roll back policies that limit economic opportunity. A few leaders that have come to mind and have been tossed around so far could be Michelle Bowman, who she has experience in financial oversight. She's already on the Fed board and supports a balanced approach to regulation. And also Kevin Warsh, who is a former Fed governor and economic policy expert who understands financial markets and promotes regulatory uncertainty. I think both of them could be good choices. There's a lot of other good ones that are out there, but we need someone who really can start to roll back these major regulations that have been put in place in the financial industry and so forth. All right. Number 5. Passing Texas school choice the right way. All right. In the news, Texas is close to passing school choice legislation with support from President Trump and Elon Musk, which is adding pressure on Republicans to act. My take is we've got to, whether we should just be funding a broken system. Texas spends nearly $100 billion annually on a failing public school system, a government school system. Yet the House's HB2, which is the school choice, which is the public school bill, and the Senate's SB 26, which is their bill to increase funding for teachers and increasing teacher pay raises, will propose another $8 billion to the system overall. And so this is a costly effect of the increase in a package deal to what they're trying to provide for the schooling system to get people on board, to basically shut up a lot of the government public school sector folks who do not want to break up their monopoly. It's riding on them, right, to use their taxpayer funded lobbying to go up to the Austin Capitol and demand that nothing be changed. At the same time, many of these schools are failing. We only have about 23% of students who are able to do 8th grade math at or above proficiency, meaning they can't do 8th grade math. All right. And then reading is right around 24% as well. So I mean, 75% of the kids taking these exams at government schools cannot do reading and math at grade level. That's just ridiculous. It's something that has to be overcome. And while I understand that there's concern or what's going to happen to the government school system and everything else, I ask you this. What about the kids? What about the kids? We're leaving them on the sidelines in order to empower a government school monopoly. That is ridiculous. It is something that gets me fired up, as you can tell, because I'm so concerned about the kids, the future of our economy, the future of our country, and their future for those individuals. We need to allow people to prosper. We've got too much brainwashing, too much lack of educating at the government school system. And instead, parents should be empowered to send the kids wherever they want to go. And so right now, when you look at HB2, I think there's HB3, which is the school choice bill, and SB2, which is the school choice bill in the Senate. Both of them only offer about $1 billion compared to the $100 billion going to public school system. Okay. Both of them are only about 1.5% of all students. And they will leave about 90% of students stuck in public schools, 90% of them. This is not a good situation. There's a better way to do it. I strongly support school choice, but it's crucial to do this right. I was against the school choice package that they tried to pass in 2023. I pushed hard against it. I may have had an impact on it. I don't know. But I'm going to push hard against this one too, if this is the type of package they want to do. They really need to come through, get school choice passed, and then let's talk about public school or government school, how much money should go there and everything else. But I really don't think we should be spending any additional dollars, if not even the amount of dollars that are going to government schools today, because we continue to have declining outcomes. 8th grade math proficiency that I talked about earlier is down 40% since 2011, even as spending per student is up 48%, which is well above inflation of 35%. We've got to do this right. More than 30 states already have some form of school choice, and nearly 15 have some form of universal school choice with education savings accounts. That's really where we need to be headed. And I hope by doing so, we can also get rid of or reduce or hopefully eliminate eventually the arcane, flawed state school finance system that we have today. Nobody would create this school system the way that we had it today. There's just no reason for it. It's massive. We need something new. I'm working on a bill with some folks now on getting an alternative form that's out there that would be just a straight ESA. If you want an ESA, you get the money. You could take it to a public school, private school, homeschool. You can craft it all together however you want as a parent. You feel empowered as a parent, and allows for us to save about $20 billion a year compared to the school system we have today. So I think this is a huge issue. We've got to get it right. But I also got to remember that there's a lot of other spending that's happening in the budget in the state budget that shouldn't be there. That's not a constitutional role. So they're trying to pass constitutional amendments to have these different funds so that way they can fund these programs outside of the constitutional spending limits and spend even more, leaving less money for school choice, leaving less money for property tax relief. That is not the situation we need in Texas. They're trying to create or build more on the Texas Water Fund of more than $2.5 billion after they put $1 billion into it already. We should be privatizing water markets, not putting more government failures in the system. We also have the Texas Energy Fund where they put $5 billion in 2023. Now they're talking about putting another $5 billion into it for low interest loans for natural gas projects. Instead of trying to combat wind and solar, which I think are bad forms of energy, but I think they should be an all the above sort of approach. We shouldn't be subsidizing any of them to counteract the federal production tax credits or the federal subsidies. Instead, we should be cutting and eliminating the severance taxes that are on oil and gas production, that fund the rainy day fund, which is already reaching $28 billion. It's reaching the cap. We should be cutting severance taxes. And then that way we can actually get some sort of level playing field between what's going on here. By propping up natural gas projects, they also want a nuclear fund now of another $2 billion. There's Alzheimer's sort of a new entity, a new hospital, a new research center that they want to put another $3 billion. All this is outside the spending limit, and it means a lot more money going to these programs and expanding government in places that should not be expanded. Let's get this right, Texas. Let's be free market capitalism. If not, we're going to end up like California, which we don't want. Okay? So there's better ways to do this because we need the best educated, the most prosperous workplace in America and even in the world. And this idea of big government industrial policy is taking us in the wrong direction. Speaking of us in the wrong direction, number 6 here is protecting Texas AI innovation from overregulation. In the news, Texas lawmakers are debating 2 competing bills that will determine the state's future of artificial intelligence. The Texas Responsible AI Governance Act, TREGA, which is House Bill 1709 by Representative Giovanni Capriglione, seeks to impose heavy regulations on AI to prevent bias. And while the Texas AI Freedom Act, TAFA, HB 3808 by Representative Brian Harrison, aims to remove bureaucratic barriers and promote innovation. My take on this is that TREGA will crush innovation. It will decimate entrepreneurship. It will decimate innovation overall. And it creates this excessive compliance, burdensome situation that really tries to regulate things out of existence for the anticipation, right? There's this, there's this idea of the precautionary principle where you try to regulate something today to try to avoid something in the future. You have precaution, right? But that overlooks the fact that there's a lot of costs that happen with any of those regulations that are put in place. It basically will stifle innovation for small and mid-sized businesses, and even the larger ones too. I mean, we're trying to expand some things with having more AI and innovation through Stargate, which President Trump helped with some of that deal for out in West Texas. While at the same time, you're trying to put these barriers in place for innovation and regulation and make us look more like California and Colorado and Connecticut, progressive bills of AI. And this TREGA bill is even more restrictive than those blue state progressive bills overall. It's just a bad bill overall. And this has nothing to do with Representative Capriglione. I think his heart is in the right spot, but it's been misled. This is a blue state bill being put in wolf's cloth or sheep's cloth, right? Of saying that this is going to be a red state bill. It's just bad news. And so I'm glad that Brian Harrison has put forth this other bill, the Texas AI Freedom Act, House Bill 3808. Please check it out. Find in the show notes, which offers a smarter path for what to do here. Basically, it creates an advisory council that will advise the governor and legislature on different regulations and making sure that there's the least stringent regulation on AI, if there's going to be any at all. Most of the things that are in the TREGA bill, right, that overregulates things, most of those things are actually already against the law within our current laws. We don't need new laws on AI regulation or AI in general, okay? We've also got to make sure we lead. And what's cool about that House Bill 3808, the Texas AI Freedom Act, is it also creates laboratories of competition. Sandboxes is what they're called. The TREGA bill does some of that as well. So that's actually one of the good parts of it, which I hope they expand on if that's the one that they continue to go through. But basically 2 parts of the TAFA bill, the Texas AI Freedom Act, are the advisory council, which should be looking at reducing and rolling back regulations and not imposing more unless only in the worst case scenarios. And the second part of that is these laboratories. And so if we have this sort of situation in place, I think Texas will lead in AI and allow for more economic growth and prosperity and so much more all across Texas and hopefully the world. All right. So thanks for joining me this episode of This Week's Economy. For more insights, visit vanceginn.com and get even greater value with a paid subscription or a complimentary subscription to my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. Thank you for joining me again today. Please share this with your friends and family. And until next time, God bless you and let people prosper.